Since my last attempt at making conductive ink for making batteries worked but was not quite right, I mixed up another batch. I did some calculations figuring 10% of the weight of the carbon to use as the weight of binder needed and a 70-30 ratio of CMC to SBR. I used 12.5 grams of homemade conductive carbon, the same as last time. The amount of carboxymethylcellulose CMC was increased to 0.87 grams and the styrene butadiene rubber SBR was increased to 0.37 grams, which is still only a few drops or so, maybe half a milliliter, but more than I used last time. Another difference in this batch was I ground up the carbon powder before adding the liquid. This made a finer powder to start with. I then mixed the dry CMC powder into the carbon and continued grinding and mixing those two things together. Next, I added some water and mixed it in, continuing to grind everything to a smooth gel. I continued adding water and mixing until I eventually had 75 milliliters of water added to the carbon and CMC mixture. This is a lot more water than I had used last time, so the ink is not as thick. Finally, I mixed the SBR into the ink and again continued to grind the ink to combine everything. To test this ink, I cut 4 pieces of graphite foil and painted one side of each with the new conductive paint. The ink still has some lumps of larger carbon pieces. It should still work, but I'm going to have to grind and sift the carbon before making the ink or use some mechanical method of grinding and mixing the ink to fix that problem. Another problem is there are spots on the foil that the ink didn't stick to and the foil is visible. This shouldn't be a problem since I am using graphite foil, but it would be nice to get a more consistent coating. I have a feeling there was oil on the foil either from the manufacturing process or from handling the pieces. Cleaning the foil with rubbing alcohol or acetone before painting them, if that is the problem, should fix that. While waiting for the ink to dry, I did some calculations for my electrolyte. I am going to use a 1 molar solution of Epsom salt for this battery, mainly because it is readily available and pretty cheap, and also because previous testing showed good results. Looking it up on Wikipedia, I found the molar mass of the heptahydrate magnesium sulfate is 246.47 grams per mole, which means that's the amount of Epsom salt that is needed to make 1 liter of a 1 molar solution. Some more scribbling and I calculated that I would need about 6.16 grams to make a 25 milliliter solution. That should be enough for a couple small test cells. If more is needed, it will be quick to mix up another batch. I used paper towel as the separator for my last test cell, which worked but dried out after just 1 day, even in a plastic page protector. Sealing it up with tape or heat sealing the pouch would have helped, but I wanted to be able to examine it, so I left it open. For this test, I am going to use a thicker, more absorbent rayon cloth bought as a cheap chamois cloth. I'll find a cheaper alternative separator when I start making full-size batteries, but this cloth should do for this small-scale battery and should take longer to dry out. The concentration of the electrolyte will increase as the water evaporates, so the cells will still need sealed up for any long-term testing, but the absorbent cloth should help for a short-term test battery. I cut the separators to be just slightly bigger than the graphite foil pieces. Another change I am going to make is how I make electrical connection to the cells. I used a couple pieces of aluminum tape touching the back sides of the graphite foil and that worked, but I want to connect multiple cells together in series for this test to get a higher voltage, so I am going to use aluminum flashing with thin wires taped on, which will make it easy to make the connections and make it easier to seal the pouches. After I made these part, I think the aluminum tape and wire combination alone would have worked, but I'm going to use the thicker aluminum flashing for this test. With all of the parts now complete, I just need to wet the separators with the electrolyte solution and assemble the cells. Each cell will be placed in a plastic pouch and the wires twisted together, connecting them in series. The cells need to be weighted or clamped down to ensure everything makes good contact, but be careful the electrolyte isn't squeezed out of the separators or it could contact the aluminum pieces, which will corrode them. Once the battery is tested, it could be held together in some kind of case, but I'll just stack them up and add some weight to check them out. A couple thin boards or plates could be used along with screws, clamps, tape, or even rubber bands or string to hold everything together can make it more portable. Since this is now a multiple cell battery, the voltage will be higher, so the charging voltage will also be higher. It is going to take a while to charge up, but that should be expected with a larger battery. I will use this battery to power a simple LED light, but other things should work depending on the voltage and current your battery provides. By cannibalizing a cheap USB power bank, I should be able to charge a cell phone with a 3 or 4 cell homemade battery if it can provide enough current, but that's a future project.